In this video, we're going to talk about the non-vascular seedless plants known as bryophytes. Some general information about bryophytes is that they are the closest living relative of early terrestrial plants. There are over 25,000 known species, and they primarily live in damp areas, although some can live in deserts and/or on the tundra. They have a really small size, which makes them tolerant to desiccation. So if they dry out, it's not actually a big deal because as soon as water comes back, they can rehydrate. Bryophytes are non-vascular, which we could also say non-tracheophyte. They do not have the tracheids, which make up the xylem. And remember, xylem are just these vessels that run through vascular plants in order to distribute water around the plant. But these bryophytes do not have the xylem. Some have special conducting cells that help to circulate water and nutrients, but they differ in structure from the xylem, so it's not considered a true xylem. Bryophytes need to live near water. They don't have roots, so they're not able to essentially spread out roots to find water. They don't have those vascular cells. They don't have that lignin, so they're not able to grow very tall because they don't have that structural support. So remember, lignin is this molecule that provides structural support. Bryophytes also need water for sexual reproduction because the male gamete has flagella and it has to be able to swim to the female gamete in order for fertilization to occur. The vegetative organs, which basically means everything but the reproductive organs, so not reproductive organs. They don't have true leaves in the stem due to the lack of vascular tissue. They do have some leaf-like structures that are involved in photosynthesis. They have a stem, a thallus, which is known as just kind of the body of the plant, and then they have rhizoids. And rhizoids are kind of like a precursor to roots. So they tend to be these filaments that help to anchor the plant to the substrate or into the soil, but they don't have the vascular tissue, so they're not true roots. They're not absorbing water. There are 3 phyla that fit under this kind of classification of bryophytes. There's the phylum Bryophyta, which are also known as the liverworts, and the phylum Anthoceratophyta, which are the hornworts, and then phylum Bryophyta, which refers to the mosses. And these are also called the true bryophytes. So it's a little bit confusing in that we have this specific phylum of Bryophyta, but then kind of all of these together are collectively known as the bryophytes. Nice and confusing, right? So let's start by looking at phylum Bryophyta, which are the liverworts. There are 7,000 plus known species of liverworts. Some of the liverworts are lobate and have a flat thallus to them. And this is actually how they got their name because these lobes looked like the lobes of a liver. Some liverworts are leafy, meaning that they have leaf-like structures attached to a stalk. And this picture here shows a variety of different liverworts. And in this picture, you can see, like this one right here, has a flat thallus. And so this kind of base structure would be the thallus. And then the leafy liverworts would be something kind of like this, with these leaves kind of coming off of a stalk. Liverworts do not have stomata in their leaves. They do have some openings in the thallus that are involved in gas exchange, but they are different structurally from stomata. They also don't have that waxy cuticle to help prevent from desiccation, so they can only live in moist, humid areas where they have access to water in the environment. Liverworts are able to produce sexually with that alternation of generations, or they can reproduce asexually. And so, taking a look at asexual reproduction, there are these interesting leaf fragments called gemmy. And it's a cup-like structure on the thallus. And so this body here, this would be like the thallus. And what happens is that there are like little reproductive cells inside of here, little spores, if you will. And these spores get splashed out of the cup by rain, and then if they land nearby, they germinate and can develop into new liverworts nearby. The next phylum in the bryophytes is phylum Anthocerotophyta, which are the hornworts. Some general information about hornworts is that they have to live in moist areas. They have these narrow pipe-like sporophytes, which you can see on this picture here. And they do have stomata. Remember, those are openings in the tissue involved in gas exchange. In the thallus, which is the kind of the body of the hornwort, there are photosynthetic cells that have a single chloroplast present. The meristem cells divide throughout the life of the hornwort, so they can continuously grow. Hornworts are also known for their symbiotic relationship with cyanobacteria, so they contribute to the nitrogen cycle by fixing nitrogen, or essentially, remember, fixing nitrogen means taking nitrogen from the atmosphere and converting it into a form that plants can use. Now we're going to focus on the phylum Bryophyta. And remember, we're talking about bryophytes as a general kind of group here, but this is more specifically the phylum known as Bryophyta. And these are also called moss. Mosses are the most numerous of non-vascular plants. There are 10,000 plus known species. The habitat is more varied than what we find in the other non-vascular plants. So they do typically live in moist areas. You see them a lot in the understory of tropical forests, but they can also be found in the tundra. And this is kind of unusual because the tundra is known to be kind of an inhospitable place for plants to live. But mosses have really shallow rhizoids. And remember, these rhizoids are kind of like roots, but not true roots, but these kind of anchoring filaments. And since their rhizoids are shallow, they're able to attach to the substrate or the ground without having to penetrate too deeply. And in the tundra, the ground is often frozen year-round. And so these mosses are still able to anchor themselves, even though they're not able to, kind of anchor too deep into the soil. Mosses play a really important ecological role. They help to slow erosion, so their rhizoids actually act kind of like anchors in order to keep soil in place. They store moisture and soil nutrients in their tissues. They provide shelter for small animals like invertebrates. They're also food for herbivores, which is especially important on the tundra, where there's not a lot of food around. And so things like caribou can eat mosses. Mosses are also sensitive to air pollution, so scientists can look at the abundance and diversity of moss in order to monitor air quality in an area. If we take a look at the morphology, and remember, morphology just means the structure of mosses. The dominant stage of the alternation of generations with mosses is actually the gametophyte stage. And this is kind of unique to bryophytes. In all the other types of plants that we talk about, the sporophyte is going to be the more dominant stage. And by dominant, we mean the one that you see more, the plant spends more time in that stage, and it's just more conspicuous, it's more noticeable. So we can see in this picture here that the multicellular haploid gametophyte stage has these kind of green, flat, leaf-like structures attached to a stalk. Now, mosses do not, so they lack leaves, so they don't have true leaves, they don't have stomata, and they don't have vascular tissue. Instead, they absorb water kind of across all of their tissues. And this is one reason why they are typically low to the ground and in areas that are wet or moist. They do have a primitive conduction system that helps to carry water and nutrients up the stalk, but it doesn't go into the leaves, which are not true leaves. It is anchored to the substrate by the multicellular rhizoids. And remember we talked about how rhizoids just help to anchor the plant in place, and it also helps to prevent soil erosion.